Right. A couple more people. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll get started here in just a minute. All right, looks like it's 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Rachel Walsh. I'm with the DEI Committee for Michigan ASLA, and this is our second webinar in the Diverse Perspective series. The Diverse Perspective series highlights the work and careers of landscape architects and students that identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, LGBTQ plus community, women, and any other minority groups within the profession. And just anyone who is interested in being featured on a DPS webinar, or if you know anyone who might be interested in joining us for a webinar, is encouraged to contact us, the Michigan ASLA DEI Committee at dei@michiganasla.org. And just a quick announcement, today the Michigan Chapter ASLA Foundation launched the information for their scholarship, the Michigan ASLA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Scholarship. It'll be a $2,500 awarded to 2 students. And you can find the information for eligibility, criteria, and requirements just at the Michigan ASLA website. All right, and with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Magdalena Aravena. She's a landscape architect with the Lamar Johnson Collaborative based in Chicago. She's an extremely active member and advocate for the ASLA. Before her role as president of the Illinois chapter, she served as the Illinois chapter's membership chair and served at the national ASLA level for the Finance and Investments Committee, as well as the National Associate Advisory Committee, and was the National Associate Representative for the ASLA Board of Trustees. Magdalena graduated from the University of California, Davis in 2015 and has been practicing in the profession for over 6 years. She is a very active public speaker and has been featured at the national ASLA conferences since 2017. Magdalena was recently one of 4 professionals recognized and given an Outstanding Service Award for her dedication and advocacy to ASLA. So with that, please join me in welcoming our guest, Magdalena. All right, so we'll start. Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
So we'll just start off. Magdalena is speaking on the importance of sponsorship, mentorship, and stakeholders for young and emerging professionals. So we have a couple questions to just kind of gauge discussion, and we'll go through those throughout the webinar. So first, Magdalena, could you define what a sponsor, what a mentor, and what a stakeholder are?
Sure. So first, thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you, Rachel and Stephanie and everyone else at Michigan ASLA for having me. Like I've mentioned to Rachel, and I've been having a lot of discussions about the importance of having those professional connections, whether it's a sponsor, a mentor, a stakeholder, or whatever you want to call it, because I think that career progression by yourself is really difficult. And so I think having someone that you can reach out to who is invested in your professional advancement is really key to all professionals, but I think especially for those who are not as well represented. So whether that's women, people of color, whoever that might be that isn't sort of in the majority and doesn't see themselves represented in the profession at large, I think it's really important to be able to have someone that you can go to. And so I think there's different levels of that. Sort of what everyone knows is a mentor, right? That's someone who is sort of hierarchically can't say that word. It's sort of just at another level as you, right? So they're in the hierarchy of professional experience, they're higher up and have been established, and as someone you look up to, and as someone who will sort of tell you, what their experience was and how they got to where they were, and as someone that you can sort of go to for, I think, sort of a top-down view of experience. And I think it's very important to have that. So it's sort of someone that you can see how they did things. But it's not always a very natural sort of relationship. It's not really one where maybe that person is invested in your professional growth. And so then we have something that a few of us have talked about before in other panels, that is a stakeholder. And so how I define that is someone who may be higher up in experience level, or they could be your peer, but really it's about kind of just like how we have stakeholders in our projects. It's someone who is invested in you and your career progression, and you are invested in theirs also. So it's more of a mutually beneficial relationship where you can kind of bounce ideas off of each other, and it's not necessarily them telling you how they did it, but it's sort of like knowing who you are and the things that you bring to the table. They can sort of guide where you think you could go, and it's just sort of, for me, a more natural and sort of mutually beneficial relationship where both of these people can have sort of feedback of information and experiences and all of those things. And then there's a sponsor who is kind of like the word says, is sort of invested in helping your progression, and they might help you with monetary resources. So whether that's internally in your company or someone outside who is sort of going above and beyond and helping you navigate your professional career through helping with resources. And for a lot of people that are, who might not have the same support either in their company or from their families or whatever that might be, because they're, maybe they don't have economic resources to get their license or to get to a conference or things like that. That's who I would consider a sponsor, is someone who is able to financially support and show their investment that way. So it's really kind of all different levels of the same thing. And I think all equally important for different reasons.
Awesome, thank you. I did just want to mention, I forgot to say this at the top, anyone who has questions throughout the webinar, feel free to post those in the chat, and we can get to them towards the end of the webinar. Okay, so moving right along past those definitions, who have been some of your sponsors and mentors and stakeholders throughout your career?
Yeah, so I think I've had quite a bit, and they've all kind of come at different times. Thankfully, because I got involved with ASLA so early on, while I was just starting my degree at UC Davis, I was able to really amass a large sort of network of people sort of right away. And I've had, at the very beginning, I had really a couple of professor instructors who were a part of the ASLA chapter in California, the Sierra chapter, who really sponsored me. And they were able to, get me to, as president-elect of the student chapter, get me to the ASLA conference. They got me to ASLA Advocacy Day, which is sort of the spring meeting for leadership. And that kind of really kicked off my own participation in ASLA, and also, cemented all of those relationships. And those are people now, Keith Wilson and Mark Truscott and a few others from the Sierra chapter, who I still go to when I'm having any sort of professional, questions that I need help with. And, they're really there, and they're invested in my progression because of where I started and because of their help there. And then I think sort of as I've progressed, I've met new people and people that I've been on panels with. I think most my closest stakeholder and sponsor really is Jonathan Giels, who's from the Indiana chapter, and we've really become, we're more than that at this point. We're sort of almost family, because if with his help and his stakeholdership in my own career and mine and his, I've been able to move from California to Chicago, and we've sort of been there for each other's advancement through reviewing resumes, cover letters, nominations for awards, and all those kinds of things. And it was something that started very sort of naturally. It wasn't like I went up to him and asked him to be a mentor or a stakeholder. We kind of met and started to discuss professional things right away. We were on a panel, and then it kind of just naturally evolved into helping each other professionally. And then I think now what I found in most of my stakeholder relationships is they sort of begin that way and are very natural and organic. And then once we've sort of established that we're both there for each other, then you make it sort of a more intentional stakeholdership where, we start having more regular calls to talk about where we're going, or to talk about how we're feeling about work or about ASLA or whatever that is, so that we're really making sure that we are helping each other grow, and being really intentional about that. And so I think that has really helped me with all of my professional relationships, and knowing that I can have people that whenever I'm struggling with anything, really, I can go to for advice and guidance, and sometimes just a kick in the butt is really all you need.
Yeah. No, thank you. That stakeholder sound is like a very professional and motivating type of friendship. So thank you. There you go. How have your mentor, sponsor, stakeholders helped you to be successful? Kind of already went over that, but if you want to touch on that, maybe in some specific ways where, a sponsor or stakeholder or mentor specifically helped you to achieve something that you possibly could not have gotten without their help.
Yeah, I think I'm, gosh, honestly, it's been almost like every professional decision I've ever made has been with the assistance or support or advice from 1 or 10 of my stakeholders and mentors. I'm someone who it seems like I just jump into decisions because I make decisions kind of quickly, but really the buildup to that is just filled with phone calls and emails of hey, I'm going through this. Can you help me sort of figure out what I'm thinking and help guide me, and maybe tell me if I have any blind spots that I'm not seeing. And so really it's been every career move. It's been moving out to Chicago from California. It's been figuring out if I need to make a career change, or if I'm just sort of in a slump, or those kinds of things. I really couldn't have done those things or figured them out without the help of I can't even 20 people that I have just sort of around me that I can call up and ask for advice, or even just an ear to sort of talk through things. So, you know, it's kind of been everything.
What should young professionals look for in a sponsor or a mentor or a stakeholder?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, it varies. I think that different professionals can provide you with different things. I don't think that one mentor, one stakeholder, or one sponsor has to be the person to sort of fulfill all of your needs. And so I think that, you know, if for instance, you're considering going into a specific sector of the industry, I think finding someone who you look up to, who is in that sector of the industry, is really important, because it can give you sort of an inside view of that, and a perspective that you'll need in order to you know, go that route. I think that obviously finding someone that you find easy to talk to, you know, a lot of the times, I think, especially as young professionals, it's sort of daunting and intimidating to go up to people that you admire. But I have found that most professionals are very open to even just having one conversation. And I think, you know, that's where you can kind of gauge where that relationship might go, whether it's, you know, a mentorship that you can sort of have that person and just, you know, maybe reach out every so often. Or, you know, a mentorship sometimes is just one conversation that is sort of about how they did things, or something deeper as like a stakeholder or a sponsorship, where it has to be sort of something that the other person also buys into. So it's not really a one-sided or like a quick transaction. It's more of just, like I said, like a relationship. And like you said, a friendship, right? Someone that is as invested in your career progression as you might be in theirs, and finding ways that you can collaborate, I think, is really important to be able to do that. So really finding someone that's open to doing that with you, and it's not something that like happens right away. Just like with any friendship, it's something that you sort of develop and cultivate, I think. And it can start off, like I mentioned earlier, as something that is, you know, organic, like a friendship would be, and then turns into something that's like, hey, let's, you know, be more intentional about what this relationship is, and have more conversations that are professional in nature, and have more talks about how it might progress, or what I'm thinking about, and all of those things. And so I think it's I hate this question, because I hate giving the answer of like, it's kind of is, but I think being intentional about who you're having professional conversations with, and also knowing that it can be, even with more established professionals, it can be a two-way street, right? You provide something, knowing that you provide something to that relationship is also important. You know, one of the professionals that I worked with at the very beginning of my career that I mentioned earlier, Keith Wilson, who I met while I was at UC Davis, he hired me. He was my first, he was the first company I worked for. And then we sort of, you know, he was always someone that I could call with for advice. And it was sort of this mentorship relationship. And then, you know, I invited him on a panel, and we started having sort of more collaborative conversations. And it wasn't necessarily my intention to say like, hey, you're my stakeholder, but he, as we were planning this panel that we were on for one of the conferences, he made it, you know, very aware that he saw me as his stakeholder, because I had invited him to do this panel, and he had never been invited to do a panel before. And so for him, I was helping him in his career progression and in doing something that was valuable to him. And so really without knowing it, I was providing value to him. And we now have this very, mutually beneficial relationship where we can sort of talk about where we're both at in our careers and, be very intentional about that. And so sometimes it's just being open to that and just not being afraid to go to a more established professional with opportunities and to show that you have value, show that you have a new perspective, that you have that you provide something that they just don't have because they're more established in their careers.
Mm-hmm. It sounds to me like a lot of what you're saying is like young professionals don't necessarily go looking for these sponsors and mentors. It's something that happens really naturally, but to not be afraid to take those steps to maybe talk to someone that's at a much higher position than you, because these relationships can really form out of anywhere. And I also kind of hear what you're saying, that it's good to just have these open conversations with a diverse range of people. So, people at the same level as you, people higher than you, people who might just be starting out, who are a couple years younger than you. You never know where you're going to find these relationships from, and they all can be really mutually beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, all of that.
So we have a question in the chat here I'll ask, because it kind of goes along with this discussion. What is a good way to begin the process of finding mentors through the ASLA, especially within one of the specialities in the profession? So if you've found mentors within ASLA, what was your approach? Or these relationships happen naturally, but what were some ways that you kind of networked within ASLA to help you gain those relationships?
Yeah, so I mean, one way, obviously, which I think would be the most sort of basic is going to local events. If you can go to local events, start conversations with people that you don't know, that are in the sector that you want to go to, or even just that you want to have an interesting conversation about a topic or something, and just start up a conversation. I know that sometimes that's, like I said, really daunting, but I've found, especially at these sorts of events, people want that, right? You want the interaction, and obviously we're in times of pandemic, so it's a little bit harder, but in normal times, I think people want to talk about their successes, and people want to talk about how they got to where they got to. And so I think just reaching out and being open to having those conversations at the local level, I think, is really sort of the easiest route into that. Obviously volunteering, because then you get to sort of work one-on-one with people and collaborate, and that opens the door to closer relationships rather than just having a conversation. And then I think next step up would be the conference, and going and interacting with the people that are panelists, and going up and asking a question, and asking if you can sort of pick their brain about something, or if you can just sort of have their email so you can ask them for advice on something, or just sort of starting up a conversation. Usually when people do these panels, they're aware that people are going to and are open and welcome the sort of interaction that you have with people outside, because at the end of the day, it's not like they're celebrities, right? They're just other professionals, and obviously they like talking about whatever it is that they're on a panel about. And so I think for the most part, you'll have people who are welcome to having further interactions about that topic. And so that's sort of an easy way to, I won't say easy because I know it's not easy to just go up to people you don't know, but it's a simpler way to sort of start that conversation, and that can lead to sort of different things. It's just like they say if you want to get an interview somewhere, ask for an informational visit and just go in and see if you can just hear about the office rather than asking for an interview, right? You're not asking for a mentor, you're asking just for a conversation. You're asking just to hear more about the person. You're asking to hear about their successes, and who doesn't like to talk about that?
Oh, that's a good point. Oops, what's it around here? Okay. Mentorship and sponsorship are helpful for emerging professionals, as we've heard, but what are some of the advantages for the established professionals who choose to be that sponsor, stakeholder, mentor for someone else?
Yeah, like, I said earlier, and some of the things that I've heard from my own stakeholders and connections is that you're able to provide, you as an emerging professional are able to provide a fresh perspective on things, right? You have more energy because you're just starting out. You're not jaded. You're, really energetic and passionate about the things that you are, studying. You have sort of a fresh outlook on things, and I think that a lot of established professionals could use that. I think that even I sometimes could use that, and I've only been working for 7 years, and so I definitely think that's part of it, is just getting a new perspective on things. I think also knowing that you're playing a part in the next generation of professionals, and that you're able to help people succeed and stay in the profession, which today is a pretty large problem for women, professionals of color, and all of the communities that are not white or male. We have I believe it's about and the numbers are kind of soft because we don't have like actual hard data, but 55% of our students are women. But by sort of the 5-year mark, that number goes down significantly. And I won't say what the number is because I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's sort of a staggering difference between the number of women that are coming in. And so the fact that we're having that much drop off is concerning. And that's just for women. We don't even have very good numbers and data for any of the other minorities, right? Hispanic, African American, Asian, because those numbers are based on survey data, and we don't have enough people to take those surveys or provide us with race or ethnicity. But we know sort of anecdotally that it's a big problem. And I know personally that it's certainly an issue when you don't see representation and when you don't sort of feel like you're receiving the same resources or the same support, or that leadership doesn't understand maybe the challenges that you're going through. And so being able to play a part in helping people stay is not only critical, I think, for your own sort of, for me at least, for feeling good about, being a professional and being sort of a team player, but it's good for the profession, because at the end of the day, we want this profession to be as large and diverse and rich as it can be, or it should be. And I think it's really important for us all to take responsibility in doing that. And I count myself as that, right? Even though I'm an immigrant and Latina and a woman, I have a part to play in that, and I think we all do. And so it's really important for us all to make sure we're doing the work so that people will stay, so that we will have the profession that I think we all want.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. Recently. All right. What are some of the best ways that mentors, sponsors, and stakeholders can uplift young professionals? Kind of gone over a lot of these questions we like touched on a little bit already.
Yeah, I think, it's being a good advocate. So, if it's sort of internally, making sure that you're elevating these voices of your young professionals, that you're taking them to leadership meetings, that you're taking them to client meetings, that you're not only taking them, but then also making sure that that they feel like they have a voice that they can use. And if they don't feel that way, then it's something that you can help sort of establish and cultivate. Finding your voice and finding that confidence to be able to speak up is not something that comes naturally to, I don't think, really anyone. It's something that you really have to find through experience and through the opportunity to do so. Because if you're shut down enough times, you just won't do it anymore. And so I think that sort of internally, those are ways that you can really do that, right? Is providing that opportunity, so that a person who's already feeling, if we're talking about people of diverse backgrounds, if we're talking about them already being underrepresented, feeling like they can't speak up in a meeting is already a huge problem. And so being able to elevate that is really important. And then it's also really important for any young professional to feel like they can speak up, so that when they're more established, they will be able to speak up in that same way to clients, and to be able to educate the client and be able to really advocate for their voice and value as a professional to the external parties. And then I think outside of that would be, through, like, for instance, through ASLA, is making sure that ASLA leadership is building up a pipeline of young leaders, because I think without the opportunities to lead a committee or to lead a meeting or to lead a project, young professionals might feel like maybe they don't belong, or like their voice doesn't matter, or like, a lot of the times I hear that, why be an ASLA member, or why, be a volunteer if I'm not seeing ASLA being what I want it to be. And I think the only way that we get there, that we get the ASLA that we want and the profession that we want, is by those people having a space to, and feeling welcome to volunteer and to show up and to do the work, and be able to speak up about the things that they want changed, and to be able to work sort of internally to make ASLA and the profession what we want it to be as future, professionals. So really, I think it's giving opportunities, whether that's at ASLA, industry-wide, or just internally within your company.
Right, completely. We have another question here in the chat. Are all of your sponsors within the field of landscape architecture, or do you like draw inspiration from mentor sponsors, and do you have stakeholders that might be outside of the profession?
Trying to think. I don't really. I do have some internal. I have some coworkers here who are architects who I definitely go to for conversations to help me navigate, and we sort of help each other navigate challenges that we might be having professionally. I certainly have that. I don't think, because I haven't been here super long, I don't know that they're like, I would say that they're stakeholders, but it's definitely a relationship that, like, if we continue to cultivate, I could definitely see that turning into that. And but that's still sort of within the field. I don't really have anyone that is like completely outside of the design profession. I will say though, I guess in similar vein, I've gotten the question a lot um, of there isn't enough representation of like for instance women in the profession. So who do you go to be your mentor if there's not enough women to sort of be there as a guide? And I'm really of the mindset that anyone can be your mentor. I have a ton of men who are my stakeholders, and just like I have some women who are also really strong stakeholders for me, and they provide very different points of views, and obviously for certain things I would go to my female stakeholders because they just understand challenges better, and then for other things I will go to my male stakeholders. For instance, like when I need a lot of the times I think as women we tend to be more timid in how we approach job searches, or how we choose like what opportunities to go for. And for me, it's been really valuable to have those male stakeholders because they tend to not be timid and they tend to just kind of go for maybe the next level up, and be a little bit more daring. And sometimes I really need that perspective of like, is this too daring a jump, or do you think that this is sort of commensurate with my experience? And a lot of the times I don't even know what is, where that line is, because I still have a hard time finding value or sort of the same value in myself as others see in me. And so having that other perspective of like, no, you're totally up for this job, or this position or this award or whatever, is really important as a female. And so I think, like I said earlier, it really is important to have diversity in who you are going for. And so if that means that you have some outside of the profession, I think that's also great because they provide a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said about, women tending to be more timid. For me, I work, the landscape architects that I work with in my office they're all men, and I consider them my mentors and stakeholders. But they've definitely helped me. I think when I was in college and when I was just starting out, I'd be a little more timid with my ideas on a design project and use language of like, oh, I think this could possibly work, or like maybe if we try this. And now, through them kind of helping me and pushing me, and me kind of like learning from the way they present their ideas, I can now come to the table with a little more confidence and kind of be like, hey, like this is an idea I had, I think would work. So I do think that it is valuable to kind of like draw your mentors and sponsors from a wide range of people, not just people who are like you, but again, that representation to also have, people who you identify with to go to, I think is also really valuable and important.
Yeah, and people that you trust. Obviously, there has to be that trust factor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where that sort of relationship building comes in.
Yeah. What were some achievements that mentors and sponsors helped you to accomplish directly? Like, do you have any specific ones in mind that that you were like lifted up by those people to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I count sort of the panels that I've been on as achievements. I started out doing these panels kind of timidly, because obviously as someone who had just graduated a couple years prior, it's hard to say like, yeah, I have something to say. and then to go up on like a national stage. And so I certainly think that having, someone like Jonathan, who really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and it was my idea of the panel that we ended up doing, and I got these people together, and because of a conversation that he and I were having, and for him to be really supportive in that, and to like really push me to, and push the group and support me in my vision for what I wanted this panel to be, was super helpful, and kind of made me realize how much I like doing these, and how much I enjoy sharing my my knowledge and my experience, and all of those things, because I think I hope that it will empower other people to do the same, because I think we need more young people of diverse experience and backgrounds to speak up, because the only way that we're going to get other people in who look like us, and who are diverse, is by just showing up and doing the work, and speaking up. And so I think that I without sort of the constant like fangirling that some of my sponsors and stakeholders do for me, like it would be hard for me to sort of believe that that I'm as cool as they say I am.
You are, don't worry. What is the importance of being an ASLA member, and what is the importance of ASLA as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think that without ASLA, I wouldn't have the network that I have today. I think that without that network that I have today, I wouldn't have been able to find a job in another city while still living in the other city, right? I went from Sacramento to Chicago, while still living in Sacramento, and being able to find a job through these connections that I had made through ASLA was key. Otherwise, I would have probably had to move. And, I think it's also really, you have to really embrace it, and you have to really kind of take all of those events and all of those networking opportunities and all of those, learning opportunities as really valuable. I mean, the way that I found the job that I ended up taking was I was still living in Sacramento, and I knew that there was an Illinois ASLA award ceremony that was going to happen in April. And I talked to one of my friends who's also a sales rep, who who was a sponsor and is still a sponsor of ASLA, of the Illinois chapter of ASLA, and I asked him if he had an extra ticket to the event, and because I didn't want to pay $100, and I attended the event. Like, I was just here for like a weekend for like 2 days, and I attended the event as if I was a professional that was here, and that was how I ended up reconnecting with someone I had met through ASLA, but that I didn't really have any relationship with, and it turned out that he was hiring. And so if I hadn't maybe had already met him, I probably wouldn't have gone up to him. If I hadn't been at that awards ceremony, I probably wouldn't even have that conversation. And, if I hadn't been to the conference and met David from Inova, then I probably wouldn't have had, a ticket to that event. It probably would have been too expensive for me to do, because I was still an emerging professional. And so really it's been me taking advantage of all of those things, and taking really good stock of what the opportunities are, and just taking advantage of them. Mm-hmm. And I think that ASLA really is just this like pool of resources, whether it's people, whether it's educational resources, advocacy. We do a huge ton of advocacy in the, sort of the back rooms that like most people don't really get to see unless they're really involved. For, things that like licensure or things that are related to the profession. And, I think one of the things that I'm trying to do now as president is to really sort of daylight those things and show that we are doing a lot of the things that, young professionals are sort of exclaiming that they want us to do, but it's like, we're already doing them. We're just not talking about it enough. And so I think that's why it's so important for people to get involved so that they know what's going on, so that they can see the work that so many people are doing in the background that doesn't really get daylit as much as it maybe needs to. But also so that they can provide their own voice, because we need everyone's perspective. And sometimes it really kind of, because I do so much work, which is all free, by the way, for ASLA, sometimes when I hear people sort of complaining about what ASLA is or what ASLA is doing or what they're not, and I don't see them being volunteers, it sort of is frustrating for me, because I think that the only way that we're going to get those perspectives heard is if people start doing the work. Because at the end of the day, ASLA is a membership organization, and it's run by members. We have staff who do, a lot of administrative work for us and a lot of really important work. But our volunteers are the ones that guide what work they do. And so if we don't have those volunteers, then ASLA is just going to go in the way that the majority wants it to. And at this point, the majority is older white men. And a lot of the times, obviously, there's a ton of white men who I adore and who are my stakeholders. But if we don't get diverse voices in there, then it's just going to look like that. And so until we start having diversity in the conversations, the organization's never going to move forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know for me personally, ASLA, like you said, just the events that they provide, whether it's the Michigan chapter annual meeting or the national conference, like there's so many opportunities that they provide for you to just meet people, to form these relationships. And I think that is just key. Even, and I mean, to be involved, to volunteer, that's opens up a whole other set of doors. But for young professionals, emerging professionals, and college students, just having access to events like that gives you this wide variety of people that, hey, we might have only had a short conversation, but that's someone I can reach out to with a little more comfortability than just cold calling someone. So I agree that it's an extremely valuable organization. A couple questions here. For students or emerging professionals in the National ASLA Mentorship Program, or anyone with a new mentorship, do you have any advice for cultivating a closer or more comfortable relationship with a mentor who is basically a stranger?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, right? Because that mentorship program itself is all online right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously it's always hard to cultivate a relationship just online. Much like any other relationship, right? You wouldn't you wouldn't have a relationship with a romantic partner if it was only online. Like that, it's so hard to like connect in a real meaningful way with only seeing that other person, I don't know, whatever it is, once a month online. But I think it's, having conversations about, your interests, or being open about things that you might be struggling with, and knowing that it's okay to ask for help, I think opens people up to sort of that vulnerability, opens people up to having deeper connections. I think it's being humble enough to ask for help and for advice, and knowing that you don't know all the things, and being open to asking for that other person's opinion, and being grateful, I think, of that relationship, because at the end of the day, that mentor is taking time out of their day to day to support you. I'm not entirely sure that you could take that mentorship, that very sort of rigid mentorship relationship, and take it to a stakeholder relationship without there being something outside of that, like, rigid monthly phone call or whatever it is. It would have to be, there has to be sort of a little bit more, I guess, just a different level of connecting. Otherwise, it is sort of just like very much just talking at each other, rather than like getting to know each other's progression and getting to know each other's struggles, and like talking about ways to collaborate and things like that. And that's really kind of hard to do when you're scheduled to talk to each other. It's sort of rigid. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think until you sort of collaborate on a different level, it just is a mentorship, which again I think is super important also for other reasons. But I don't think every mentor has to be a stakeholder. I think every one of those relationships provides a different value, and having someone who can sort of give you very concrete points of view and experience, and share their experience with you, I think is really valuable for someone just starting out. But until you can have a sort of feedback loop of ideas and of experiences, and be able to talk about different things, then it's sort of hard to, I think, make it more than just a top-down mentorship.
Mm-hmm. I think in terms of, taking a stranger to maybe someone, like for me personally, Gina Ford is someone in the industry who I very much admire. And at the previous National ASLA conference in San Diego, she's a complete stranger to me, but I have my coworker who you've mentioned, Jonathan Giels, who is also a mentor to me. He's someone that can kind of bridge that gap between me and a complete stranger. So maybe utilizing those shared contacts, or, kind of like you touched on earlier, young professionals, I think, underestimate how much established professionals love talking about, their accomplishments and their goals. So to kind of maybe like go up to that stranger and just kind of mention something maybe like about them, people are much more willing to talk than a young professional may think. I know, coming personally, I'm still scared of it, to like talk to a stranger, but people
I am too. I
tend to be friendly.
Honestly, like I am, it doesn't, a lot of people tell me like, oh, you're so extroverted, and you like all of these things. And I have a really hard time going up to people I don't know, unless there's someone I know there who can, like you said, bridge that gap. And like start the conversation. And just like, I hate being at events by myself. Like, I'm the worst at like talking to new people. And, a lot of people would not even know that, because I don't do it. I am very intentional about always bringing someone to events. So I think knowing your own limitations, and being honest about how to with yourself about how to sort of overcome those, I think is also really important.
I think we have a couple more panel questions here that are good, so I'll throw them at you real quick here. We got, just like 5 or so minutes left. How do you, oh, this is a good question for you. How do you start a panel or get involved more as a presenter with one? You've spoken at several ASLA conferences, so how do you go about getting involved in that?
Yeah, so I think, let's see, the first one was, it was a conversation that I found myself having with a few different people. It was right after the elections in 2016. And it was a conversation about diversity and sort of, politically everything that was happening. And it was a conversation I saw myself having with a few different professionals. And I knew that I wanted to, that I wasn't sure how I was going to get myself to the next conference as far as like financially. And so I knew that if I became a presenter, that I would get, financial resources to do that. And so that was when I sort of reached out to John and, I said, what do you think about this? And about like submitting a proposal for this. And he thought it was a great idea. So then I reached out to our other, at that point, there were just sort of connections, Diana Fernandez and Hana Ishikawa from Chicago. And we all agreed that it was a great conversation that we wanted to have, and we submitted a proposal for it. And really, it's been mostly that. It's been, at least the ones that I've sort of started have just been conversations that I have noticed myself having with professionals. And because the conference happens late fall and then the proposal is due sort of early winter, it gives you like meeting new people at the conference sort of gives you an in to like then saying, hey, would you be interested in like doing a panel on this? Now also like a big thing is just being active on Twitter and seeing what the conversations are there and, engaging with professionals in that forum, which seems to be, to me, it seems like it's a little bit easier for people to do that because it's social media and it's a little bit more casual. And so you can engage with people like Gina Ford it's easier to like bridge that gap without having to know someone that knows her. And I'm not saying that like that means that an emerging professional is going to be able to like have a panel with Gina Ford. But it sort of starts conversations that way and gives you an opportunity to just sort of gauge what the interest might be. And also just reaching out to people and saying, I have this idea. What do you think? And most of the time they'll say yes, because everyone wants to, like I said, most people want to talk about things they're interested in. I've only ever had a couple of people say no, and it's mostly been because they weren't going to the conference or because they were just too busy to put a proposal together.
So we have time for one quick question here. If you had a past mentorship that had fallen out of touch, would you suggest trying to rekindle that or just look for a new mentorship?
I'd say both. I think that you can always just reach out to that person again and say, hey, I've missed talking to you. How's life going? And just start that way. And always look for new people and professionals to chat with. And, I'll just sort of tie in the last question, utilizing other platforms. Like I use Instagram and Twitter a lot, and I have had, conversations with people like Gina Ford or, the LAM editors or writers and people that I normally wouldn't talk to otherwise. And just sort of just starting the conversation. I know sometimes it's hard to like get yourself to do that. But nowadays with social media, people just sort of expect to be reached out to.
Mhm. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Magdalena. We really appreciate it. This is a great topic for emerging professionals and students. This video will be available at the Michigan ASLA website under the DEI and then videos and webinars tab. So once it's up within a couple of days here, feel free to share, send to other colleagues, students, anyone. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Magdalena, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.